My fiancée signed the prenup without issues, but when her loser brother showed up, she modified the documents to steal my multi-million business, and a private investigator exposed them all. I'm 34 years old. I own a chain of 12 organic grocery stores spread across 3 states, and 6 months ago, I was about to marry who I thought was the love of my life. I built this business from scratch over 10 years. You know, I started with a small location that didn't even have air conditioning, and I scaled it up little by little until I turned it into something worth several $1,000,000. I never imagined that someone would try to take it all away from me, much less the person I was planning to spend the rest of my life with. I met Samantha like 3 years ago at a business conference, one of those boring ones where everyone pretends to be super interested in the PowerPoint presentations, but really they just go for the networking and free snacks. She worked as a social media marketer for fashion brands. She was 29. And honestly, I thought she was amazing from the first moment. She was smart, funny, ambitious, and seemed to understand my obsession with work because she was also building her career. We spent 2 years dating before I proposed, and when I did, I felt like I was doing everything right, that I had finally found someone who really understood me. When we started planning the wedding, obviously the topic of the prenuptial agreement came up. It wasn't something I brought up out of nowhere to be controlling or distrustful. It was simply the logical thing considering I had a business I'd built long before meeting her. My lawyer, who's helped me since I opened the 3rd store, told me it was basically mandatory, and I explained it to Samantha in the most honest way possible. I told her, look, this isn't because I don't trust you or because I think we're going to get divorced. It's just protecting what I built before we met. You know what I mean? And she understood it perfectly. In fact, she herself said it seemed super reasonable and that she had no problem with it. She even joked, saying that if she had a fashion empire, she'd do exactly the same thing. We spent like 2 months reviewing the terms of the agreement. I was more than fair, honestly. The prenup basically said that the business and all assets related to the stores remained mine in case of divorce, but anything we acquired together during the marriage would be divided equitably. It also included a clause where, if the marriage lasted more than 10 years, she would receive a generous compensation. I wasn't being cheap or anything like that. I just wanted to protect what had taken me a decade to build. Samantha signed without any drama, and I thought, perfect. This is exactly how a mature relationship should be. But then, like 9 months ago, her brother Brian came back to town. This guy, I don't even know where to start with Brian. He's like 37 and already on his 3rd divorce. Can you believe it? 3 failed marriages before 40. He's also had like 5 or 6 businesses that failed spectacularly, including an investment company that basically stole money from its own clients. Samantha always defended him, saying he'd had bad luck, that circumstances didn't favor him. But I knew the guy was a walking disaster. I never liked him, but I also didn't think he'd go this far. When Brian returned after his 3rd divorce, he stayed with Samantha's parents temporarily while supposedly looking for work and reorganizing his life. He started showing up at all the family gatherings, at dinners, at weekend plans, and I noticed that Samantha was spending more and more time with him. At first, I didn't give it much importance. I thought she was being a good big sister, supporting him with wedding plans and stuff. But then her behavior started to change in ways that now, looking back, are super obvious, but at the time I didn't see coming. Samantha started spending money like never before. And when I say spending, I mean ridiculous amounts on completely unnecessary things. Designer bags that cost the same as the monthly inventory of one of my smaller stores, shoes worth more than some of my employees' salaries. I asked her what was going on, and she said she was investing in her professional image, that she needed to look good for her fashion clients. It made sense superficially, I guess, but it was too much, too frequent. She also started asking me weird questions about the business. Not the casual type like before, like how was your day, but super specific questions about profit margins, supplier contracts, expansion plans, financial details that had never interested her. Once she asked me how much each store made individually, and I asked her why she wanted to know that, and she got defensive, saying she was just trying to better understand my world because we were getting married. I felt guilty for questioning her. You know? I thought I was being the paranoid, controlling boyfriend. The strangest thing was when she started saying she wanted to work with me in the business after the wedding, that she could handle the stores, social media, that she had ideas for marketing campaigns, that we could be a power team. I explained to her that we already had a marketing department and that my assistant Rebecca was in charge of coordinating all that. But she insisted she could contribute much more, that she had connections, that she could take the business to the next level. She became almost obsessive about it, and when I told her no, she'd get angry and accuse me of not valuing her skills. Like 6 months ago, 2 months before the wedding, my lawyer called me saying he needed to review something urgent with me. I went to his office thinking it was some minor paperwork related to the store expansion we were planning for next year. But when I arrived and saw his face, I knew something was wrong. He showed me the prenuptial agreement that was supposedly finalized, except it wasn't the same document we'd signed months earlier. Someone had modified it, and the modifications were absolutely insane. The new agreement said that Samantha would have the right to half my business in case of divorce, no matter how long the marriage lasted. But it wasn't just that. It also included clauses that gave her rights over future expansions, over any new business related to organic food that I opened, and basically made her a partner in everything I had built and would build in the future. My lawyer was furious, literally furious, because he said those modifications had been sent from Samantha's email with a note saying they were just minor clarifications that we had both agreed to. I sat there unable to speak, feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. That night, I confronted Samantha. I showed her the documents and asked her what the hell was going on. She went pale for a second, but then regained her composure and started saying they were just standard protections, that her lawyer had recommended those changes, that she didn't understand why I was so upset. I told her they weren't standard protections, that she was basically trying to steal my business, and she started crying, saying I didn't trust her, that I was being paranoid, that she would never do something like that. But I didn't believe her anymore. Something about her performance felt fake, rehearsed. The situation got worse when she showed up, unannounced at a business meeting I had with potential investors for a new product line. She walked into the boardroom like nothing, introduced herself as my future wife and future business partner, and started giving opinions on expansion strategies that made no sense. The investors looked at each other super uncomfortable, and I had to get her out of there as politely as possible. Afterwards, she yelled at me in the parking lot, saying I was humiliating her, that she had a right to be in those meetings, that she'd be part of the business soon anyway. It was terrifying, honestly, because I no longer recognized the person I had planned to marry. What I didn't know at the moment was that Brian had been working on Samantha's parents and her whole family, filling their heads with lies about me. He told them I was controlling, that I didn't value Samantha, that I was just using her as a trophy while building my empire. He painted a picture where I was the villain who refused to share my success with the woman I loved. Samantha's parents, who had always been super nice to me, started treating me coldly, making passive-aggressive comments about how successful men should support their wives. It was total madness. I decided to investigate a little more and asked Brian to grab coffee with me, like casual, to talk man to man. I went with my phone recording in my pocket, which probably wasn't the most ethical thing in the world, but at that point I didn't care anymore. And this guy, literally confessed everything to me, without me having to press much. He told me that Samantha deserved a part of my success, that I had been selfish with the original prenup, that after the wedding he expected to get a position in the company, maybe as director of operations or something like that. He said it so casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He talked to me about his expansion plans for my stores, about how he planned to use my contacts to launch his own projects. It was surreal to hear him talk about my business, as if it already belonged to him. 2 days later, Rebecca called me on a Sunday night, which was super weird because she never works weekends unless it's an emergency. She told me she had found Brian in my office, trying to access my computer. The security guard had seen him and stopped him, but he managed to review some files before they kicked him out. And the worst part is that Samantha had given him the access codes. She had been sharing confidential business information with him for weeks, maybe months. Contracts, financial numbers, supplier data, expansion strategies, everything. They had basically been spying on my company. At that moment, I knew I had to end everything. I couldn't marry someone who was actively conspiring to steal from me. You know what I mean? It didn't matter how much I had loved her, or how much I had invested emotionally in the relationship. So, with my lawyer, we drafted a formal email canceling the wedding. We included all the evidence of the prenup fraud, the recordings of the conversation with Brian, the access logs showing that Samantha had shared confidential information. It was the hardest email I've ever had to write in my life, but also the most necessary. Samantha's response was, I don't know how to describe it, like completely unhinged. Instead of apologizing, or at least admitting, what she had done, she went into total revenge mode. She had an emergency credit card of mine that I had given her to use only in case something happened to her, and in 3 days, she spent $122,000. $122,000 in 3 days. Jewelry, designer clothes, furniture, art, plane tickets to Paris she never used, reservations at expensive restaurants. It was like she was trying to punish me in the most expensive way possible. I called her when I saw the charges, and she was literally in a Louis Vuitton store, buying her 5th wallet of the day. She told me she deserved it for everything I had put her through, for humiliating her by canceling the wedding, for ruining her life. I told her I was going to cancel the card right that instant, and she started screaming, saying I couldn't do that she still had things to buy. I hung up and called the bank. I can still hear her screams through the phone. But then something happened that I didn't expect. Isabella, Samantha's younger sister, contacted me. She had always been the most sensible one in the family, worked as an accountant, and never got involved in drama. She told me she needed to see me urgently, that she had discovered something. We met at a Starbucks far from where anyone in her family lived, and she arrived with a laptop. It was Brian's laptop, which apparently he had left at his parents' house. Isabella had found it and checked it because she suspected something weird was going on. What she found was basically the complete scam plan. Brian had created folders with names like Organic Stores, Plan, and Marriage Strategy S. There were spreadsheets detailing how much my business was worth, growth projections, analysis of how to divide the assets after divorce. There was a timeline showing every step of the plan, from when Brian returned to town to the planned wedding date and beyond. He even had emails with a corrupt lawyer who had helped him modify the prenup, someone who was supposedly a legitimate professional but was willing to commit fraud for the right price. The most disturbing thing was that Brian had been planning this for months, probably since before I proposed. There were notes on how to manipulate Samantha, how to convince her she deserved a part of the business, how to use her love for me against me. There was even a document titled Pressure Points, where he listed my insecurities and how to exploit them. It was sickening, like psychopath level. Isabella was crying when she showed me, saying she couldn't believe her brother was capable of something like this. I asked her if Samantha knew all this from the beginning, or if Brian had manipulated her too. Isabella said she honestly didn't know, that Samantha had changed a lot in recent months and that she thought Brian had some kind of control over her. She said Samantha had always idolized her older brother, that she always defended him no matter how terrible his actions were. I copied all the information from the laptop before Isabella returned it to her parents, because I knew I was going to need that evidence. When Samantha's parents saw what was on that computer, everything changed. Mrs. Collins called me crying, apologizing for doubting me, saying Brian had deceived them all. Mr. Collins came personally to my office to tell me he completely supported my decision to end the relationship, that he would have done the same. They basically kicked Brian out of their house and told him they didn't want to see him again. Samantha tried to contact me like 2 weeks after all this. She showed up at my house unannounced, with red eyes from crying, saying she finally understood what Brian had done, that she had also been a victim of his manipulation. She said she truly loved me, that she had never wanted to steal my business, that she just wanted to be part of my life in a more meaningful way. But even at that moment, even with tears running down her face, she couldn't fully admit her responsibility. She kept justifying her actions, saying I had also been to blame for being so closed off with my business, for not including her in my plans. I told her it didn't matter how much Brian had manipulated her. She had actively made decisions to betray me. She had signed fraudulent documents. She had shared confidential information. She had spent over $100,000 in revenge. Those were her decisions, not Brian's. I told her that maybe a part of her was a victim of her brother, but another part was absolutely complicit, and that part was enough that I could never trust her again. Samantha tried one last legal move, hiring another lawyer who argued she deserved some kind of compensation for emotional damages, for the time invested in the relationship, for the public humiliation of the wedding cancellation. It was pathetic, honestly. My lawyer basically destroyed them in the first hearing, presenting all the evidence of the fraud, the recordings, the documents from Brian's laptop. The case was dismissed in less than an hour. Brian faced more serious charges. Turns out he wasn't just trying to steal my business through Samantha, but he had been selling confidential information that Samantha passed to him to some of my competitors. Corporate espionage, the prosecutor called it. Now he faces several potential years in prison, and all those companies that bought information from him are being investigated too. His life is an even bigger mess than it already was, if that's even possible. I had to change all the security protocols in my stores after this. New passwords, new access systems, complete audits of everyone who has access to financial information. Rebecca was incredible during the whole process, helping me reorganize everything while I emotionally processed the betrayal. I gave her a huge year-end bonus because honestly, I don't know what I would have done without her. Now, 6 months later, I'm completely focused on expanding the business. I'm going to open 3 new stores next year, including one in a state where I've never had a presence before. Romantic relationships are totally off my radar for now, probably for a long time. My friends try to convince me to go out with someone, again. But honestly, I'm still processing everything. It's not just that I was betrayed, it's that the person I thought I knew didn't even really exist. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I had married her without discovering any of this. How long the marriage would have lasted before she tried to divorce me and keep half of everything. 1 year, 2 years, 5. Brian probably had calculated the optimal time to maximize what they could get. It's scary to think how close I came to losing everything, to handing over a decade of work to people who only saw me as an ATM. Last week, my mom asked me if I was ever going to forgive Samantha. I told her that forgiving and trusting are different things. Maybe someday I can forgive her, in the sense of letting go of resentment for my own peace of mind, but I'll never be able to trust her again. And without trust, there's no possible relationship. My mom nodded and changed the subject, but I know she worries about me, that she thinks I'm going to end up alone and bitter surrounded by organic grocery stores. I don't know if she's right. What I do know is that I built something real, with my own effort, something worth protecting. And if that means being more careful about who I let into my life, if that means having stricter prenups or just being alone for a while, then so be it. Because, at the end of the day, I can live without a romantic relationship, but I can't live knowing I handed over everything I built to someone who never really valued me.